A very good morning to our honorable guest speaker, Mr. Tehseen Poonawalla, Professor Amita Vaidya, Director Sarla Anil Modi School of Economics, our faculty members, staff, and the audience present here with us today. I'm Muskan Prabhu-Gaunkar, Vice Chairperson, and I would like to welcome you all on behalf of the entire team of HCon X Ka-Ching 22. We welcome you to the 12th edition of Ka-Ching, our annual Economics and Management Fest, and the 3rd edition of the Economic Justice Conclave, HCon, organized by SVKM's NMIMS Sarla Anil Modi School of Economics, Mumbai. In the 2nd edition of HCon, we tackle the issue of inequality, bridging the gap. After a raging success, I now invite the president of HCon, Ms. Vedika Dandania, to introduce the theme for 2022.
Good morning. I am Vedika Dandania, President HCon Ka-Ching, edition 2022. It's debate, discourse, and discussion in society. Freedom. The acronym developed by us, FREED, stands for Free Reign of Egalitarian Expression and Discourse. From discussing the technical aspects of our economy under the garb of financial freedom to discussing the simplistic, unapologetic art that artists in our economy manifest, our aim is to truly reimagine a free society. In the course of the last few months, we've worked on 3 integral aspects of modern freedom: psychological, artistic, and digital freedom, speaker sessions, and student-led discussions. Now, as we look forward to the 3 days of our conclave, we aim to holistically look at its other aspects in a contemporary context via sessions with experts, the policy challenge, the youth conference, and action on ground via social outreach. With this, I hand over the dais to our Honorable Dean, Professor Amita Vaidya, the backbone of SAMSO and our ever-present guide. Ma'am.
Thank you, Vedika. Chief guest for the day, Mr. Tehseen Poonawalla, faculty in charge of Ka-Ching and HCon, Professor Navid Fatima and Professor Pulkit Nigam, Chairperson of Ka-Ching, Aryan Goswami, President of HCon, Ms. Vedika Dandania, Team Ka-Ching, invited guests, and dear students. Good morning and welcome to Ka-Ching and HCon. A special welcome to Mr. Tehseen Poonawalla, who has so kindly accepted our invitation to give the keynote address in today's session. Ka-Ching started a cultural festival in the first year of the inception of the school, which was 11 years ago. And today, it has evolved into this popular economics festival. It was a natural genesis when HCon was introduced 2 years ago as a part of Ka-Ching. The idea was to take a topic and theme relevant and of significance, and hear different perspectives from experts through conclaves, town hall sessions, and come up with policy suggestions. In fact, in 2 years, the HCon has actually got a commendation from the minister, the union minister as well. This year's theme echoes the ethos of what the university and the school stands for. We at Sarla Anil Modi School of Economics believe in nurturing the spirit of inquiry among students, and thus this year's theme, Free Reign of Egalitarian Expression and Discourse, is befitting. I wish Team Ka-Ching and HCon all the best and wish all the students a fun and thought-provoking next 3 days here at the festival.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now like to invite our chairperson for HCon X Ka-Ching 22, Aryan Goswami.
Good morning, everyone. As the chairperson of this fest who has seen it evolve from what it was to what it is today, it gives me immense pride to welcome each and every one of you to the stage of the Economic Justice Conclave ex Ka-Ching 2022. From what began as a vision to create a business and economic conclave, to spark interest amongst the youth, like Amita ma'am pointed out, to what we have now, hosting 17 events, 7 speaker sessions, a national policy challenge, and now a youth conference simultaneously in a span of 3 days, we have truly come a long way. And as someone who has been a part of this journey for years, I'm proud to be here. Every year, we start with a new zeal and passion to create discussions in and around social issues that continue to impact each and every one of us. This year, when we asked ourselves this question, are we truly free? What does it mean anymore? In the end, we weren't really sure of any of the answers we had. And the goal was to find the reason behind such a thought, and through the course of 3 days, we shall answer this and many more questions as we put our best foot forward to difference. Each of the sessions across the 3 days will attempt to be a droplet in the vast ocean that is a social and economic justice. With that, it is with immense pride, anticipation, and excitement that I, Aryan Goswami, Chairperson of Economic Justice Conclave and Ka-Ching 2022, declare the fest open.
I would now like to hand over the floor to the moderator for the session, Aditi Mathur. Thank you.
A very good morning to everyone who has joined us today. I would like to welcome all of you to our session called Caught in the Red Tape, hosted by HCon X Ka-Ching 2022. I am Aditi Mathur, your host and moderator for the session today. In today's session, we will attempt to bring to light the role of institutions and the importance of giving them complete autonomy in sectors of the economy that have now become more relevant than ever: healthcare and education. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Tehseen Poonawalla, who will be the opening speaker for the conclave and will give us an insight into institutional autonomy. Mr. Tehseen Poonawalla is a social activist, a political commentator, and a businessman. He is India's youngest political analyst, according to reports. His articles have been published in several leading newspapers and magazines. He was recently seen expressing his concerns about institutional autonomy and the National Education Policy 2020. Mr. Tehseen Poonawalla is a life coach and used to mentor the younger generation in addition to being a political commentator. He's a regular guest on prominent television news channels, articulating his viewpoints on matters of national importance. A very warm welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Before we start this session, I would like to inform the audience that we would be answering questions at the end of the session. So please send in your questions on Zoom personal chat to Archisha Malhotra or Taran Shukul. Without any further ado, let's get started with this session. Over to you, sir.
At the onset, I'd like to begin by wishing all of you a very happy belated Republic Day, and may our country always be the constitutional democracy that our forefathers envisaged it to be. Thank you so much, Aditi, for the wonderful, wonderful introduction that you gave me. At a point, I was wondering, are you talking about me or somebody else? So it's very kind of you. And many, many thank you to HCon. I've heard so much about your fest over the last so many years, and you guys are doing such a wonderful job. So thank you so much for having me here. And thank you for having me as the opening speaker. It definitely is an honor that I will cherish for the rest of my life. So thank you so much for having me in your midst. Also, thank you, Aryan, Professor Vaidya, Muskan. You guys are doing such a wonderful job, and I do hope that I can do justice to the topic today, which is about institutional autonomy. Because in my opinion, this is a very, very important topic that concerns each and every one of you, particularly students who are going to step into the next phase of life, and that is their career ahead. When we talk about institutional autonomy, and since we are going to focus on education per se, And your topic for this year, as Arjun said, is Are We Totally Free? Something that you all have been contemplating. I think freedom can only come or can only exist in an institutional framework where institutions function autonomously. What do I mean when I say that, and how do I link? Your conference today is, or your session today is called EdgeCon. This is Economic Justice Conference. And for economic justice to prevail in our country, or to prevail the world over, one of the basic requirements is that institutions must be able to deliver to the last man or woman standing absolute what is committed by the state, the benefits that the state is committed, whether it's in terms of education, whether it's in terms of healthcare, whether it's in terms of food resources, whether it's in terms of anything else that has to be delivered. And only when the last man standing in the country, or the last woman standing, the most vulnerable, get that institutional support from the nation, can we call ourselves a truly independent country. And independence is what leads us to freedom, because freedom is and will only come when each one of us have choices to do what we deem is right, to improve and enhance our quality of life and the quality of life of our family, of our friends, of our society, and the country and humanity at large. So going on to the theme of Are We Truly Free today in 2022, India, which is celebrating 75 years of independence, I think there are a few basic questions that we need to ask ourselves. Since 2014, we've had a change of government. There's been a new government that's come in, particularly a union government, that in my opinion has absolutely decided to crush dissent, has absolutely decided to crush rights of people, and has taken away the freedom and liberty that people enjoyed in our country. While we celebrate constitutional democracy, which we did yesterday, it was the coming forth of our constitution that guarantees us liberty, justice, equality, and free speech. Just evening before last, in Lucknow and Patna, fellow students were being beaten up mercilessly by the Uttar Pradesh and Bihar police for protesting for what was a recruitment scam in the union government examinations in the railways. That the exams were called off the next day and the government admitted to the scam is another matter, but students were completely beaten up, tear gas thrown, and the police then comes on record and says these were not students, these were absolute miscreants masquerading as students. So students protesting are not students, farmers protesting are Khalistani, those in JNU and Jamia, your other co-students are Pakistani and Bangladeshi. People protesting other rights are funded by foreign agencies. The only person or the only people trying to do something good for this country is the government of India that considers everybody else its enemies, in particular students. And this is a trait that this government has carried forward. It started with attacks on JNU. It proceeded to attacks on Jamia. We now saw in UP and Bihar students being attacked. And at that time, we asked ourselves the question, can there exist institutional autonomy for educational institutions? How will they exist if colleges are permitted to become battlegrounds, police are permitted to come in, get into students' rooms and beat them up mercilessly? How will autonomy exist? We come from a legacy where, and I'm very anti the left economic policy, but a Sitaram Yechuri could stand next to Indira Gandhi as Prime Minister, criticize her on her face, tell her why she shouldn't be chairperson of JNU, and the next day the Prime Minister resigned. We come from a legacy where Manmohan Singh, when he was invited to JNU to give a speech, left students were protesting. Again, like I said, I'm against the left economic policy. The action was taken against the students, and the Prime Minister calls up the JNU Vice Chancellor and said, no, they are students. We may not agree with what they say, but they have a legitimate right to protest against the Prime Minister. No action can be taken against them. To today, where police are going into institutions, entering students' rooms, entering students' dorms, and beating them up, and sometimes with tear gas. And we're talking about institutional autonomy. Every single institution in our country today is under attack from the union government. Every single attack. And since this is the economic justice conclave, let's talk about the economy. The biggest institution to safeguard our economy is the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India. And in 2016, this government attacked the RBI when it did the ill-timed, illogical, ridiculous, and absolutely barbaric demonetization. We now know through records that the RBI opposed it. The RBI governor then, Urjit Patel, said this will not solve the problem of black money. The previous RBI governor, Raghuram Rajan, said absolutely it's a stupid idea to implement. And yet, it was the Prime Minister who came on TV and banned 500 and 1,000 rupee notes, when it is not the jurisdiction of the Prime Minister to enter into the domain of the RBI, and creating unparalleled suffering, destroying the economy, leading to about 9 straight quarters of the economy and the GDP falling, and causing untold misery and amount of SMEs shutting down. If that was not stepping onto the domains of the RBI, one institution that held India proud, one institution that kept Indian economy floating in the worst of times, and one institution that was respected world over, he's now filled the RBI, including with the RBI governor, with people who have no experience in economy. The RBI governor is a bureaucrat who is an MA in history, filling it with, instead of professionals, people who owe allegiance to him. Let's look at the next institution, the Parliament. And I bring in the Parliament because a number of legislations have been tried to pass to Parliament which are blatantly against the basic structure of our constitution, whether it was the CA, NRC, which I've challenged in the Honorable Supreme Court, which the government is now on record telling the Supreme Court, no, we've not notified the rules. And why did you pass such a legislation? Because you knew it was blatantly illegal. To passing the farm laws, the 3 black farm laws that caused so much of suffering, that caused 700 farmers to be martyred. And I want to share with you how the farm laws were passed in the Rajya Sabha, the upper house of parliament. Because we're talking about institutional autonomy, the chair of the Rajya Sabha is the vice president of India. A man or woman occupying that chair is supposed to be neutral and bipartisan. The 3 farm laws were passed on a voice vote. And when members of parliament of the opposition asked for a division of vote, because on that particular day, the government, the BJP government did not have the numbers to pass these 3 black laws, because even their allies were siding with the farmers and they knew that these laws were draconian. The government just passed it on a voice vote without allowing a division of vote, which is a fundamental right of members. And had that division of vote happened, the government would have lost the numbers and these laws would not have been passed. What followed was a year-long agitation by farmers, 700 farmers plus martyred. The government shamelessly says in parliament they don't have a data of the farmers who are martyred. And yet, farmers were beaten up, called gundas and khalistanis, were called foreign agents. Spikes were put on the road so that they couldn't march towards Delhi. And all sorts of attempt was made to vitiate a protest which the government had to give in and say, look, the farm laws are bad on. The Supreme Court had to put a stay on these farm laws. Let's go to the next institution, the judiciary. When you have a sitting judge of the Supreme Court judging his own sexual trial, and that judge is then sent to the upper house of parliament, you've got to question how independent are our institutions and how autonomous they are at a time when we're celebrating our 73rd Republic Day or 75 years of independence. The Constitution given to us is a living document. It's the greatest book that each one of us will have. It's our greatest possession. It is what safeguards each one of us. It is what gives us rights. And when these rights that we fought for over 200 years to take, to grant ourselves the right to govern ourselves, is taken away from us, well, every time we question, when students question the government, where are the jobs? You guys are called anti-national. You guys are called Pakistani, Bangladeshi agents. That is the time you know that institutional autonomy is declining. When we come into the institutional autonomy of healthcare, another subject that you all wanted to reflect upon, let's look at the COVID second wave. This is a government whose prime minister, our prime minister, goes to Davos and says, before the second wave, India has defeated COVID without having purchased the vaccines. So every major democracy in the world purchased vaccines in August 2020, except the government of India. They did not purchase it. They didn't go to Davos and say, no, India has overcome COVID despite not having vaccines. What follows was the greatest human tragedy that India has seen since 1947. People dying for lack of oxygen. And instead of remorse, the government gets up in parliament and says they don't have data of people who died because of lack of oxygen because nobody died because of lack of oxygen. It shows how brazen this government is. It shows how much it wants to infringe upon your rights. And why do I bring and highlight these two students of economy, students in college, of what is happening? Because if you look at data the world over, in the long run, in the short run, sure, you may have some economic progress where there is no constitutional democracy. But in the long run, if you look at countries that progress economically, that achieve and manage to give their citizens a good quality of life versus those that don't, the only countries that manage to do it are countries that are functioning constitutional democracies. Without democracy, there cannot be economic justice. Let's take a step back and go back 75 years into history. Let's go back into that great speech given by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Tryst with Destiny. And what does Pandit Nehru say, the first Prime Minister of India, and perhaps one of the wisest statesmen to have led this country? He says the aim of independence is to wipe every tear from every eye. While that may not be, that may be beyond us, we need to try and find an end to poverty, suffering, the end to fight diseases. That is the aim of the greatest man of our country, Mahatma Gandhi. And are we fulfilling Gandhi's aim today? Are we wiping every tear from every eye? Are we even close to it? A union minister threatens farmers who are protesting on camera. A couple of days later, his son runs over these protesting farmers. And the story is weaved that the farmers pelted store on the union minister's son's car, and therefore the car turned turtle, until I had to tweet the video of actually what happened, and a number of police cases are filed upon me. Until then, until the Supreme Court has to step in, the son is now behind bars and the video is proved authentic. Has the union minister resigned? Has he even apologized for the 5 farmers who were killed, brutally murdered, and the other 3 who died in that cars running over them? Are we becoming a barbaric nation? And if we do, what economic justice will be served to people? Countries where there exists conflict, Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, some of the African nations, you will never find prosperity there, because prosperity can never go hand in hand with conflict. Prosperity can never go hand in hand where there is no democracy. Democracy and prosperity are 2 parallels. They have to go together. But increasingly, democracy is being sacrificed in our country. Autonomy is being sacrificed. When we go and we see students of JNU, some of the brightest minds of our country, who are asking for jobs being attacked, being called agents of China. When students in Jamia are called Bangladeshi or Pakistani agents, tomorrow when you, students of such a prestigious institutions, will come out, what are the job opportunities in front of you? And when you ask these questions, you will be given either an answer that you can make pakoras, as the Honorable Prime Minister said, that making pakoras is a great job, or you will be told that you're agents of some country and therefore you're trying to corner the government. What institutional autonomy remains? And night after night, every single institution of our country is being compromised, and those in charge of maintaining it are completely surrendering their spine to the government. There is a Supreme Court judgment. There's a Supreme Court judgment in which the Director for Enforcement Directorate, an investigating arm of the government of India, an investigating agency, and the Supreme Court says last year, no further extensions will be given to the Enforcement Directorate. And yet, after suspending 13 members of parliament from the opposition in Rajya Sabha, the government passes a bill extending the tenure of the Enforcement Directorate. If this is not the murder of democracy, and the same Enforcement Directorate is used to raid any opposition leader who questions the government, any businessman who decides to align with the political ideology that's opposite the government, the Enforcement Director is being used, and so is the Enforcement Directorate, to use it to file frivolous cases upon people, whether it's businessmen, whether it is opposition leaders. And a judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court is just taken for granted and is overturned in the parliament. You've got to question yourselves, how will India progress if businessmen who want to ask questions of the government are going to be raided by the Enforcement Directorate? How long is this going to continue? And therefore, I say that when we talk about institutional autonomy, whether in the sector, education sector, whether in the healthcare sector, whether in sector of other institutions, whether it's our parliament, our judiciary, our media, our investigating agencies, where does it leave India when every single institution is caving into the pressure of the government? Today, the government, which promised us more governance, less government, is in our bedrooms. They are in your kitchens deciding what you can eat. They are in women's bedrooms deciding who women can love, who they cannot love. They're coming up with ridiculous laws to prevent your autonomy, women's autonomy. And yet, night after night, they consider themselves to be nationalists and you're to be anti-nationalists. That is the worrying factor. Night after night, another institution of India is crumbling, which before 2014 kept asking questions of the government. Today asks questions only of the opposition, the media in our country. Another institution that's completely collapsing. Every night you'll have some program decimating hate amongst Hindu Muslims, decimating hate against the opposition, making it difficult for the opposition to campaign, and glorifying the Prime Minister as if he's done something great for the country, when every single economic data point, every single other data point shows that the government of India has failed on every single aspect. Let's look at national security. When China, for the first time in 40 years, our soldiers were martyred to China. The last time we had a war with China was 1967-68, Natula and Chola, when India defeated China in a war. After that, we had a stare down with China in the 80s, 86-87, when India made Arunachal Pradesh a state of India from a national territory. India looked down China in the eye and the Chinese army backtracked. The Chinese army had come on. There's a standoff between the Indian army and the Chinese army, and the Chinese army backtracked because the Indian army was at the border taking on China. So we lost to China in 65. We defeat China in 62, I'm sorry. We defeat China in 67, 68. We stare down China in 80 and make China backtrack. We've never since then lost a single soldier who's been martyred to China. And yet, during the COVID times, every April, May, India and China do military operations in Ladakh. In March, April, May 2020, India did not do military operations in Ladakh owing to Operation Namaskar, which was to do with COVID. There were 19 reports by the Indian Tibetan Border Police Force, which comes directly under the Home Ministry, Mr. Amit Shah, to the Home Ministry saying China is intruding into our territory. There were 18 satellite images sent to the government of India that China is intruding into our territory. And yet the government of India, the Home Minister, was busy campaigning in Delhi and decided to ignore it until 20 Indian soldiers were martyred. Colonel Santosh Babu had led that fight. And the Prime Minister then comes on television and says nobody entered Indian territory. If nobody entered Indian territory, why were these soldiers martyred? Is it the government's claim that India entered into Chinese territory? No, then they say China entered. So if China entered, whose fault is it? About a week ago, a Bharatiya Janata Party MP, Mr. Gao, says that China has since 2018 created villages in the state of Arunachal Pradesh and kidnapped young Indians like you all. And yet the government of India and the Home Minister, breaking COVID protocol, is campaigning in Uttar Pradesh and not bothered about Indians being kidnapped from Arunachal Pradesh and new villages being created after 2018. We've given up patrolling until finger 8 in Ladakh. Part of what we were told is the disengagement in Ladakh at the Pangong Tso lake is that there will be no fresh constructions. Since then, China has constructed a bridge over the north and south part of Pangong Tso. And yet the government of India does not want to talk about it. Is this the institutional autonomy of the army or the armed forces that we're talking about? That even our armed forces have today been used for political gains, but we cannot talk about what is happening. Why is our government regularly failing in protecting our armed forces? Let's look at every single part of what is happening in our country today. And why I want to highlight this to each one of you is because unless each one of us do not rise and start questioning what is happening, India's economy will not grow. Sure, you'll get great forecasts. India's economy is slated to grow at 8%, 9%, 10%. But nobody talks about the fact that India's economy collapsed minus 23.8%. If it collapsed minus 23.8% and it grows 8%, you're still in a minus. And therefore, for the first time in over 45 years, India's economy is set to contract. Today, our per capita, our PPP is lesser than that of Bangladesh, a country we formed in 1971-72. Our PPP is lesser than theirs. How will we serve justice to people? How will we take ahead the Indian dream of bringing people out of poverty? In the 10 years preceding this government, we got a record 27 crore people out of poverty, according to United Nations Poverty Index. 27 crores. This was the highest number of people got out of poverty in a decade, barring China. And today, in the last 7 years, particularly in the last 3 years, 23 crore people have slipped back into poverty. Please ask yourselves, if the economy contracts, where will you as youngsters get jobs? What businesses will you start? Let's talk about RBI data. RBI says, and this is pre-COVID, our manufacturing units were manufacturing at 60% capacity. This is pre-COVID. It's gone down post-COVID. How will new jobs be created if new manufacturing units don't set up? What is our policy for skilled and service sectors? Because we know when technology improves, the manufacturing sector will reduce jobs. Because if it, say, for example, takes 100 people to make a car, as technology improves, you'll only require 70 people, 60 people. Where will you accommodate those 40 youngsters? They will only be accommodated in the skilled or service sector. What is our policy regarding our skilled or service sector? Can anyone share that with me? There's no policy of the government of India. What is our policy required with regards to education? With so much fanfare, when in my introduction, Aditi very kindly spoke about the national education policy. It was launched with so much fanfare, so much fanfare. And what happened? Exactly a year later after that policy was launched, neither is the policy implemented, and the education minister of the country was changed. So why did you launch the policy? What is this education policy delivering to people like you that will enable citizens like you, students like you, become entrepreneurs, join your parents' business, start your own businesses, or join great service sectors? What are the new companies that have come into India, multinationals, over the last 7 years that have created jobs? Because we've had a net job deficit. Ultimately, today, we are in a situation where every time we look at institutional autonomy in various sectors, including education, healthcare, media, or constitutional authorities like the parliament, like judiciary, like investigating agencies, etc., you see that there's been an attack on them. And this has weakened the foundation of our democracy. Weakening the foundation of our democracy will only and only mean less opportunities for people and less chance for equality to prevail. And unless equality does not prevail in our country, our demographic dividend, which is you, the youngsters, will turn into a demographic nightmare. If people don't have jobs, you will get mobs. There is no rocket science in that. The worst mob attacks across the world, whichever century you look at, has happened at a time those countries have suffered economic recession. So you either have jobs or you have mobs. And to create jobs, you need freedom of speech, you need freedom of thinking, you need freedom of constitutional guarantees that have been given to us, and you need swift delivery of justice. Unfortunately, while we very proudly celebrate, and we should, 75 years of independence, something that this government had no contribution in, its forefathers, its political forefathers were absolutely cahoots with the British, opposing the freedom movement, opposing Mahatma Gandhi, and actually trying to backstab Mahatma Gandhi in the freedom movement, including Mr. Bose. They were anti-Mr. Bose as well, who they claimed to be their mascot. Bhagat Singh, who they claimed to be their mascot. Bhagat Singh, incidentally, was a leftist, not a rightist. This government had nothing to do with it. So while it celebrates the 75 years of something it had nothing to do with, it's taking away daily freedom from each one of you. It's taking away freedom from your institutions. And every single time anyone rises to ask what happens next, how is the roadmap ahead, you all are attacked, your families are attacked, your personal lives are attacked. And I think that to me is very worrying. So I think that one of the things that each one of us must strive and do, is that when we talk about economic justice, and an economic justice conclave is said, we must understand that one of the ideals of us becoming an independent nation is to become masters of our own destiny, to give everybody the right to life and dignity, to give everybody the right to opportunity based upon their merit skills, and to give everybody the right to reach their goal of making their lives, their families' lives, their loved ones' lives, and their society's life better, thereby making the country's life and humanity better. I think today those are the questions that need to be asked on institutional autonomy. Where are we placed? There is one last constitutional aspect that I would like to bring up in front of you. This is in particular to do with institutional autonomy of education institutes. One of the things that I think a lot of students must speak about or must talk about in your groups is that the idea to discuss your projects, your ideas, the ability to take your ideas forward must be unrestricted. Every time students have come across trying to bring about a change in society by bringing their ideas forward, they have been met with resistance from the government. They have been met with resistance terribly, brutally by the government, including students being put in jail. Students like Disha Ravi for standing up for environmental issues, students like other activists who stood up for other fundamental right issues. And I think as a student community, you guys need to come ahead and put your ideas forward passionately, strongly, and defend those ideas. Because you guys are the future. If you don't stand up and defend your ideas, this nation is not going to be able to create opportunities for all of y'all. When we talk about the dream of India being a $5 trillion or a $10 trillion economy, when we talk about an India creating jobs for everyone, those jobs are only going to come when there is exchange of ideas, exchange of thoughts. When these ideas, when these thoughts are stopped, when they are prevented, when educational institutes are told you can only do this and you cannot do that, at that time, you start seeing a decline in the progress of a nation. Great nations are not built by great people. They are built by great educational institutions. And therefore, it must be your endeavor, your struggle to maintain the autonomy of your institutions and to maintain what the ideas that you all profess. That should be your struggle, because when you all do that, will your institutions progress? And when your institutions progress, will this nation progress? All the great countries in the world, all the great economies of the world have one thing in common. They have great educational institutions. This government attacking educational institutions because you guys ask legitimate questions. You all are not puppets of the government. You all ask questions, where is the jobs? You all ask questions, why is the economy tanking? You all ask questions, why is the Hindu-Muslim divide? You all ask questions of the government, and the government is scared of questions. You all ask questions that are relevant. Therefore, the government uses brute force against you all to scare you all. If any of you all saw those visuals of what happened the night before Republic Day, how the police used tear gas on students from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, you would have had tears in your eyes. You would have had your eyes moist, wondering that these are students who are only asking for their jobs. But there's also one more thing to ponder about before I end. Why is it that after 75 years, for a job of a railway clerk, PhD and MBAs are applying? Where does that leave our job situation, and where does that leave our institutions? With that, I'm going to take question and answers. Thank you so much for having me here, and I wish you guys all the best.
Thank you so much, sir, for the stimulating talk. And I'm sure for all of us, your views were really thought-provoking. And we have got an interesting bunch of questions, and I would like to start. So should I start with the first question?
Please, please.
Okay. Our first question from one of the audience members is that, so you have spoken about conflict and democracy. However, one of the most important elements is fear. Do you think that institutional autonomy can exist without fear?
The government will always put fear in y'all when y'all question. There'll always be fear. But we have to overcome fear. As Rabindranath Tagore said, where the head is held high, into such a land let my country awake. They want to scare you. Why do they want to scare you? Bullies always try to scare people. They try to scare people because they are afraid of your piercing questions. So fear will exist. I was scared when I tweeted the video of the Home Minister's son running over farmers, because I knew there'd be a number of cases on me, and there was. But how long are you going to be scared? Because if you are scared today, they will succeed. You cannot be scared. There's a beautiful couplet which I would like to recite. It's called Faiz Kehte Hai. It's not written by Faiz, but it's a beautiful couplet and just take a couple of, I'll recite a couple of lines. कुछ लोग तुम्हें समझाएंगे. Some people will explain to you. कुछ लोग तुम्हें समझाएंगे, वो तुमको ये बताएंगे. जो है वो भी खो सकता है. Some people will explain to you what you have you can lose. कुछ लोग तुम्हें समझाएंगे, वो तुमको ये बताएंगे. जो है वो भी खो सकता है. इस राह में रैजन है इतने. Raisin means thieves, highway thieves. कुछ लोग तुम्हें समझाएंगे, वो तुमको ये बताएंगे. जो है वो भी खो सकता है. इस राह में रैजन है इतने. कुछ और यहां हो सकता है. Now the answer is कुछ और तो अक्सर होता है. कुछ और तो अक्सर होता है, लेकिन तुम जिस लम्हे में जिंदा हो, ये लम्हा तुमसे जिंदा है. ये वक्त फिर लौट कर ना आएगा. तुम अपनी करनी कर गुजरो. जो होगा देखा जाएगा. जो होगा देखा जाएगा. Let them do what they want. We have to stick to the democracy. Had Gandhi got scared, had Nehru got scared, had Patel got scared, we wouldn't have got democracy. Tilak from my city of Pune, he was faced with sedition charges in a Pune court. Jinnah was representing him. He was standing in a Pune court, and the judge said, apologize, or we'll charge you with sedition. And Tilak replies, freedom is my birthright. Swaraj mera janm se adhikar hai, main ise lekar hoga. He didn't get scared. He looked at the judge in the eye and he said, don't get scared. They are bullies. They will back out. They backed out with farmers. They'll back out with students.
Thank you, sir. This was a very interesting take, especially with the couplet that you recited. And so I would like to move on to the next question. How do you think economic justice can be practiced while maintaining democracy in a country like India, where there is a huge population and a wider income gap?
That's precisely why democracy is needed. Democracy is precisely needed to get people out of poverty. People will never come out of poverty if there's no democracy. It's not happened anywhere in the world. Democracy means the right. It means the ability to know your rights and the ability to. Thank you. Democracy means the ability to know what your rights are and to have your rights, to have the government enforce what are your rights and to have them given to you. There are a number of tools that bring about economic justice in democratic terms that were set up. For example, the RTI, the right to information, something that this government has weakened terribly. The RTI was the most powerful tool in the hands of the poor person. All he or she had to do is file a 10 rupee RTI and they would know how much funds is allocated. Why has the money not reached them? Why is the money not reached the block panchayat to panchayat? Second is democracy. Again, under democratic setup, there were schemes like Manrega that ensured that there was a level playing field in terms of a minimum wage. Therefore, people got at least 100 rupees per day for a certain number of days in a year, thereby guaranteeing them a minimum income. So within the peripheral of democracy is the only way economic justice can serve. Ultimately, the goal of India must be to give everybody a level playing field in education, healthcare. Once you have that level playing field, everybody gets the same basic education, same basic healthcare, then based on merit, people can go ahead. But that cannot be achieved without democracy. How will you achieve that level of equality without democracy? Because democracy by itself means equality. What is happening today is 5% of India is getting richer, is getting extremely rich. And the rest 95%, as I said, the economy is contracting. If the economy is contracting, if you are getting poorer, if your parents are getting poorer, who's getting richer? And that is a fundamental question. Those questions can only be answered through democracy. Therefore, you require strong institutions that take on the government, that make sure that the government delivers to the last mile. As Gandhi said, the last man standing must get justice. And that justice is economic justice.
Thank you, sir. I see a lot of interest from the audience and we are getting a large number of questions. So I will move on to the next question. So you spoke about the roadmap ahead and being the masters of our own destiny. As students, we have always been restricted by a constant societal pressure of a following template to study, get a degree, get a job, marry, have children and repeat the cycle. And the part of the reason for this is our mindset. So how do we change this? Are institutions that fearful having students deviate from the original mindset?
Yeah, institutions are very, very fearful, more so in the last 7 years. There are institutions that, of course, allow students' voices to echo completely. Great institutions like yours that allow economic justice conclaves like this. But by and large, I've noticed a pattern where institutions are completely getting subverted to governmental pressure. and they don't want their students to voice dissent, to voice their opinions. They just want status quo to be maintained. There are two aspects to your question. Aspect number one is the societal pressure. That will take a societal mindset, that will take a larger mindset. And I think that is happening because people today realize, let me talk about women. Women don't need to get married. Why do you women need to get married? You're so better off without us men. But seriously, on jokes apart, there's much more to life than getting married and producing children, right? So I think today that, at least in certain parts of urban India, is being accepted, while societal pressure individually amongst families is accepted. People are looking at success stories that have not followed the conventional path, and that is getting the recognition. So that part is fine. That society will change. As so far as institutional autonomy and institutional pressures are concerned, I think it's very important that institutions start resisting these pressures. There has been an attempt to sort of push students into a corner, and this attempt is again because students want to ask basic questions about jobs, about the roadmap ahead, about, like you said and quoted me, being masters of their own destiny, and the government is afraid of those answers. What answer does it give somebody like Anika out here, or somebody like you, Aditi, out here, or any of the other participants who are listening, when they say, where are the jobs today? What answer does it give you when it asks, why is a PhD holder applying for a job of a peon today? What answer does it give you when students like you will ask that for 10 years under the previous government, we had the highest growth rate in the world? How come today we are even lower than Bangladesh? What answer does it give you when it says that we were masquerading as nationalists and we said boycott China, but our trade deficit with China is today the highest, and we've actually increased our export with China since our soldiers have martyred by twofold? It doesn't have answers to give you. And to avoid these answers, it calls you anti-national. To avoid these answers, it calls you a terrorist. To avoid these answers, it calls you, as the SP of Prayagraj yesterday said, and I tweeted back to him, that how do terrorists masquerade as students? I mean, these are all titles that they give you. The real ruffians, the real goons is the government. They are the ones who are acting like goons. Why can't they listen to students? If the students, look, you're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. You can't be half pregnant. So either there was a flaw in that railway exam or there was no flaw. If there was a flaw, which you did call off the exam the next day, why did you beat up the students? And if there was no flaw, why did you call off the exams? So you look at this government. It called the farmers Khalistanis. It did everything to discredit the farmers and ultimately called back the farm laws. So why don't you do it in the first instance? Because they're not democratic. They didn't take part in making this constitution. They didn't take part in the freedom movement. This government has no clue about what freedom is. They're a bunch of dictators that come from an organization that is anti-women, that is anti-students, that is anti-democracy. It comes from an organization, the RSS, which said that the Constitution of India is imported, that refused to fly the tricolor. And today they are masquerade as nationalists. They are not nationalists. They are anything but nationalists. And that is the problem. And because they are not nationalists and they have no history, they try and poach a Subhash Chandra Bose, they try and poach a Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, they try and poach a Bhagat Singh, and they try and make you anti-nationals only to show them in good light. No nationalist would ignore 19 satellite images that showed China was intruding into Indian territory. No nationalist. But the Home Minister of India was busy campaigning in Delhi, in the Delhi elections, rather than paying attention to what's happening in Ladakh. That is the sad reality of our country.
Yes, sir. I'm sure that this is something that you have left the audience to ponder over. Time doesn't allow me, but wish we could talk for longer. Thank you so much for answering our enthusiastic audience. Before we answer, would you like to give us any closing comments?
I just want you all to remember these beautiful lines by Dinkar. Dinkar is one of the best poets, and the background to the lines that I'm going to say are from a poem called Krishna Ki Chetavni. The background to this poem is Lord Krishna goes to Duryodhan to avoid the war, and he tells Duryodhan that, look, I've got a message from the Pandavas, and just give us 5 villages and we'll stay there. And Duryodhan tries to arrest Krishna and the arrogance of Krishna. So the lines are, the lines of the poet of this poem is, मैत्री की राह बताने को सबको सुमर्ग पर लाने को भगवान हस्तिनापुर आए पांडव का संदेशा लाए. मैत्री की राह बताने को सबको सुमर्ग is peace, to bring everyone on the path of peace. भगवान हस्तिनापुर आए, Hastinapur is where Duryodhan stayed. पांडव का संदेशा लाए. दो न्याय अगर तो आधा दो, ना भगवान सिंह, दो न्याय अगर तो आधा दो, पर इसमें भी यदि बाधा हो, दे दो केवल 5 ग्राम, रखो अपनी धरती तमाम, हम वहीं खुशी से रहेंगे, परिजन पर 80 ना उठाएंगे. So God is saying, if you want to give justice, give complete justice, but if you can't give, just give 5 villages. I'll stay there we'll all stay there. We won't even look towards you. Now this is very interesting. दुर्योधन वो भी दे न सका, आशीष समाज की ले न सका, उल्टे हरि को बांधने चला, जो था असाध्य साधने चला. जब नाश मनुष्य पर छाता है, पहले विवेक मर जाता है. This government has lost its vivek. Therefore, it wants to arrest everybody. Anybody who shows dissent, it wants to arrest. Who is God? God is you, the citizens of India. What makes us a republic? Republic and country and sovereignty is not made up of the mountains, the river, the land. It's made up of you, the people of India. As I said, we are ending with, yesterday was our constitutional day, our Republic Day. What are the first 3 words of our constitution? We, the people. Hum Bharat ke log. What is Hum Bharat ke log? We are more important than the president, the prime minister, the chief justice, any other institution. If we are not respected, we, the people of India, are not respected, then who's going to be respected? The constitution starts with us. It does not start with any God. It does not start with any president, prime minister, I, the prime minister of India, I, the president of India. It starts with we, the people of India. Those are the first words of our constitution. This great book that we gave to ourselves, this great democracy that we gave to ourselves, we. And they want to tie us down, we, the people of India. And therefore, it is our duty to stand up and to maintain our autonomy. And by maintaining our autonomy, maintain this great book, the holiest book given to us, the Constitution of India. One last request to every one of you. You're all going to do very, very well in your careers, and I really wish that for you. But do take some time out and read our constitutional democracy, read about our constitution, read about the constitutional debates we had at the time of forming this constitution, because this is the most important book that you will give to yourself and the most important book you will ever read. Countries that don't have it are really longing for it. Don't take it for granted. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm sure we are going to take back your feedback on this. And I now request the Vice Chairperson, Muskan Prabhu Goenkar, to give the vote of thanks. Thank you.
On behalf of the entire team of HConX Ka-Ching, I'd like to thank our speaker, Mr. Tehseen Poonawalla, for this riveting session, Professor Amita Vaidya, the faculty, staff for joining us today, and our wonderful audience for being so participative and engaged throughout the session. I would like to take a minute to thank our sponsors, Yari, Pollard Steels, All Cargo Logistics, and the Siddhi Vinayak Group. We would also like to thank our sponsors, D Decor, our home furnishing partners, Feel Fellowship, our youth leadership partner, Goodwill Breeza, our real estate partner, Ered Software, our technology partner, Finlatics, our fintech partner, our college community partner, Insight One, our blockchain partner, Chatur Ideas, and our overseas education partner, Global Opportunities. We're also grateful to Adarsh Housing Finance and Deku Landscape Irrigation for their support. Finally, we express our gratitude to Elan Accessories and Cinnamon Sticks for helping us as our gifting partners. We hope to see you at the next session. Thank you.